Late September 1949. A stooped, overweight, elderly man shuffles out of the front door of the Federal Reserve Bank in New Orleans' Central Business District. It's possible he wants to open a bank account there, even though he already has 18 forgotten ones at various other banks, with balances ranging from $1 to over $600. Although not in the best of health for some years now, he definitely feels under the weather on this day. Wearing a piece of rope for a belt, he stops at the top of a short flight of stone stairs, feeling suddenly dizzy. For some reason, his customary walk around the city to every camera shop in town has exhausted him, but he never takes the public transportation, always the same well-trodden path, like a ritual. Nearly every day, he hobbles all the way up to the bus station on foot for his lunch, and gets a bag of orange jelly slice candies for dessert. Then he heads for the Kodak store, where he falls asleep in a chair. When the staff get tired of his snoring, he is woken up and gently reminded it's time to leave. But today, the weary photographer E.J. Belloc feels much more than his 76 years. His stoop seems more severe, his steps laboured, and his little squalid apartment on Dumaine Street in the French Quarter seems very far away to him. At the top of the stairs, the old man's face suddenly goes white. He falls into a faint and tumbles down the short flight of steps, hitting his forehead on the pavement. The news circulates around the camera stores he had always haunted. Old Belloc just dropped dead on Canal Street. Joe Sanarans is standing behind the counter at the Katz and Besthoff Camera Center when he hears the news. Sanarans may be the closest person in the world to Belloc, other than Belloc's brother, but that is not necessarily very close. E.J. was not the easiest person to befriend. But Sanarans remembers when he himself was sick in the Hotel Dieu, a Catholic hospital. Belloc actually made the effort to walk all the way up there to visit him. Joe Sanarans could hear him shouting, "Where's Santarac?" at the nuns in the hall. Joe was so surprised to see Belloc there that he didn't care if he got his name wrong. On one occasion, the old photographer even brought Joe back to his apartment at 619 Dumaine, and showed him a secret that shocked him even more than Belloc's trip to the Hotel Dieu to visit him. The old man had a stash of 8 by 10-inch glass negative photographic plates in an old trunk. These images depicted ladies of the night from the old red light district, Storyville, which had been closed down by the Navy almost 30 years before. Lots of the women in the images were naked. Belloc flipped through a stack of plates, occasionally stopping at different photographs of one particular woman and saying, "And this one is Adele." Joe Sanarans reasoned that Belloc probably spoke French, but he'd only heard him speak English with a New Orleans accent. He also showed Joe some amazing photos of New Orleans Chinatown, one of them the inside of an opium den with lacquered bunks. Joe only knew Belloc as a man who could not even capture a good photo. Take for example a streetcar that was decorated to sell war bonds. While handling EJ's photo processing, Sanarans once got a look at a whole batch of Belloc's negatives of the blurred back end of that streetcar, it having invariably pulled away by the time Belloc had gotten the exposure and focus right. This didn't deter him. He always kept trying, though. A stubborn old man, Joe chuckles to himself. When Joe hears of Belloc's death, he feels a little sad that he can't return the visit Belloc had paid him when he was in the hospital, EJ having passed so suddenly like that on Canal Street. But although old Belloc had taken that nasty fall on the street, he wasn't actually dead yet, but hovered near it in the hospital for over a week. But details like these turned out to be unimportant. Nobody cared much about Belloc. He was a nobody, an old photographer slowly going senile while living off a small annuity, who people only remembered because he was a common sight wandering around downtown. Often he'd try and talk to the pretty young women who came to get their negatives developed at the camera stores. But no one had paid him much heed, and his existence was quickly forgotten. The ambulance had taken Ernest Belloc, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, to the charity hospital, where he is unable to give the doctors any information. He stays there until they discover his next of kin, his 74-year-old younger brother Leo, a Jesuit priest, at which point the attending doctor transfers him to the Mercy Hospital. When Ernest speaks, he rambles deliriously and doesn't make much sense, and Leo realizes that this is just about the end. Leo has had to watch for years as his brother declined, so Ernest's fall is not much of a surprise. Even though his brother's sensual sins and the company he would keep in his younger years is not what a good Jesuit would approve of, his fancy clothing back then was also something Leo didn't approve of, like the flashy horseshoe stick pin with 11 diamonds, the gold lady's head cufflinks with the matching tie clasp, or the red scarves that were much too ostentatious. This end, though, was much harder for Leo to watch. This was not the Ernest Leo knew. Back in the day he never would have entertained the thought of wearing a rope for a belt, when he was the promising young scion of a good family. Ernest and Leo grew up in a wealthy Creole family. Marie, their mother, was the daughter of a successful merchant from France, and their father, Paul, held a position as a bookkeeper and later as secretary and treasurer for a wholesale firm. Their elegant home was in the French Quarter. Ernest never made the honor rolls in school like Leo, but he completed 10 years of classical education at the College of the Immaculate Conception, at which point his father got him a job at the firm. But Ernest was restless and moved between jobs frequently, working as a bookkeeper or clerk at different businesses in or around the French Quarter. He had already become obsessed with photography, and by 1898 the city had recognized him as a very capable and talented amateur photographer. The year before, Storyville had proudly opened for business, and a picture of Ernest Belloc, handsome and dapper at age 25, appears in a local publication. The publication asserts that Mr. Belloc is a descendant of one of our most aristocratic Creole families and has entry to the most exclusive of social functions. In 1902, Ernest's mother died. Around this time he was nearing 30. He decided to quit his job and concentrate upon his real interest, photography. With his mother deceased, the family house to himself, and his brother absent, studying for the priesthood, his new freedom allowed him to follow his eye. In constant proximity to Storyville, Ernest often ventured 1 block from his front door into the legally sanctioned district of prostitution. Ernest is reported to have said to a friend that he had always spent every cent he got. While Leo was studying theology, Ernest was studying human desire in steamy Storyville. Ernest soon adopted his flamboyant outfit to be seen around town. He stood out with his red neckerchief and monogrammed jewelry. If there was ever a Storyville dandy, Ernest fitted the bill perfectly. He eventually became a professional photographer and operated for a short time a studio on Canal Street, the city's main commercial thoroughfare. Later he relocated his studio, for financial reasons, to a furnished room he rented. For a few years during World War I, he opted for steady work as an industrial photographer for a shipbuilding company. But he always stayed close to the Church and College of the Immaculate Conception. He often photographed its buildings and the classes of Catholic school children. A few days after Ernest gets admitted to Mercy Hospital, his weary body gives out. The cause of death is listed as cerebral arteriosclerosis, diabetes, obesity, concussion, senility, and old age. Leo has him placed in the family tomb near the park. Soon afterwards, a notary and a witness, Augusta Bonacase, probably the daughter of Paul Belloc's business partner, go to view the contents of Ernest's safe deposit box. They find no will. They do find a locket, maybe the same locket that appears around the necks of some of Belloc's models. Leo picks up a woman's diamond rings with Tiffany settings, which Marie probably left to Ernest, in the futile hope of him one day getting wedded, and realizes he hasn't seen them since they circled his mother's fingers. A rosary lies among the old broken watches and jewellery. Then the trio go to EJ's musty apartment. Much of the furniture is broken, and many of the lamps and pieces of photographic equipment are also in pieces or damaged. No doubt they discover the 8x10-inch negative plates bearing the images of the women of Storyville, but they decide not to list them in the inventory. They considered the images pornographic and illegal at the time. Leo is Ernest's sole heir, and the negatives ended up at some point in Sal Ruiz's antique shop. They probably pass through several hands before a certain Lee Friedlander acquires them from Larry Borenstein. Borenstein had stored them in a decayed bathroom in the old slave quarters behind Preservation Hall, which was photographer Pop Whitesall's studio at one time. Apparently the roof at some point developed a leak, and some of the plates got water damage during Hurricane Betsy. At some time, an unknown hand had also scratched many of the women's faces from the fragile emulsion. Everyone assumed that Leo had revised the plates as soon as they'd fallen into his hands, in order to protect the identities of the women, many of whom attempted to seek respectable positions after Storyville closed. It was a mystery because Ernest photographed the same woman twice, and while one negative sustains deliberate damage, the other remains untouched. Thus, her identity still remains obvious. If protecting identities was his motive, why would Leo have randomly scratched out a face here and there, instead of taking a hammer to the whole collection? Leo, a fire-breathing moralist, would have destroyed the negatives rather than selectively scratching the faces. Recently, Lee Friedlander has re-examined the plates and tried to duplicate the scratching with a sample area, but the emulsion flaked off instead of scratching. The emulsion around the original defacement in some areas is folded over gently, and this could only have happened when the emulsion was still wet. Therefore, E.J. Belloc probably defaced the negatives himself shortly after he developed them in the early 1900s. In one photograph, however, a woman wears a carnival mask that has been positioned to hide her eyes, possibly echoing some ambivalence that made Belloc scratch the faces from so many of his negatives. Yet that is not the only curious aspect of his Storyville work. In one pair of photographs, a woman stands clothed in the first image in front of heavy wooden doors, but in the second image she is nude. Her face has been scratched from the negative, and a heavy couch has been pushed in front of the door. A locket, another repeating motif in Ernest's Storyville work, also becomes visible in the second image. Another image shows clearly a lock on the door, but a cord from an electric light has been further wrapped around the lock in what looks like an obsessive attempt at privacy. Why would the photographer feel the need to use a couch, a lock, and a wire to keep the door shut in an expensive brothel? Rugs used as hasty partial backdrops and, in one case, sawhorses also suggest that Ernest may have intended to remove the backgrounds from his images, to imitate the romantic photographs and paintings he preferred to hang on his walls. In fact, one of his portraits is clearly shown vignetted and framed in one of the two studies of his desk. Yet another of his images presents a woman visiting a sick colleague, probably at the isolation hospital for victims of sexually transmitted diseases. When we consider that Ernest followed these women to the hospital, carrying a bulky 8x10 camera, it certainly suggests a documentary dimension to his work, and would indicate that he had much more than just a prurient interest when it came to his ladies of Storyville. In the dearth of information after Belloc's death, many almost mythic descriptions of him surfaced. Varying reports of Belloc described him as insane, hunchbacked, grotesque, dwarfish, or hydrocephalic, leaving the world with not much choice but to consider him a virtual New Orleanian counterpart to Toulouse-Lautrec. The best image of Ernest shows him wearing a hat, and in truth he was probably an average man of average height for the time, and in the portrait displayed, looking quite dapper and handsome. Though the international photographic community now recognizes Belloc the artist, his New Orleanian contemporaries had not the slightest idea that photography itself might one day win the status of a fine art form, and neither did Ernest. 20 years after Ernest Belloc's death, the Museum of Modern Art decided to exhibit his art. After photographer Lee Friedlander acquired Belloc's glass slides, he began to make prints from them, and described in his book how difficult it was to produce these prints. I soon found that I could not use my usual method of reproduction, as the plates did not respond well to silver bromide paper. Even with the softest grade of paper, the tonal graduation was still too limited. In doing some research, I came across a print process that was common around the turn of the century. using copying processes and had the property of self-masking. In this process, the negatives were transferred to the paper using direct sunlight. Friedlander invested much time and patience because the exposure with this process took between 3 hours and 7 days. Luckily for us, he took it upon himself because otherwise we wouldn't know anything about Belloc's work today. In Ernest Belloc's Storyville series, we see these women through the eyes of a man who grew up a block and a half from their rooms, which were both living space and workplace for them. He showed a stark yet compassionate frankness and refused to glamorize or objectify the women. What is striking about Belloc's portraits is how differently he depicts the women. Some pose nude, others appear in holiday attire. Some appear rigid and insecure, yet others are very relaxed and happy. This suggests he often gave his models free rein over how they wanted to present themselves. Ernest Belloc's body now lies in the family tomb across the bayou from the New Orleans Museum of Art, where he never dreamed his private photographic project would one day be displayed. My dear friends, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. For those of you who remember my presentation about Lulu White, the Queen of Storyville, which I did a couple of years back now, I would say, well, at that time, I saw an article about Ernest Belloc, the photographer of Storyville, and I thought, I'm going to cover that. At some time in the future, that is definitely something I wish to share with my viewers. And so I haven't forgotten. I had it bookmarked, and here we are. I hope it was worth the trouble. I think it was. This is something really quite unique at the time. I don't imagine many people were doing that type of documentation. We'll call it documentation, as it is, actually. Whether or not Ernest himself got some perks out of it, probably. But he also gave these women their dignity. He let them pose as they wished to present themselves to the world. And as you can see through, and we'll have a look at a few of the individual slides in a moment, but that's what makes it really unique. They have a story to tell. We just have to try and decipher it. I would love to know how he approached these women and presented the idea of doing their portraits. I would love to know what he said. We'll never know, but it's quite interesting. You know, that comparison to Toulouse-Lautrec, it is there. You know, Toulouse-Lautrec didn't feel comfortable in his social circle with the upper class. He was aware that his physical appearance might be the subject of merriment to his peers, and so he felt more comfortable with the outcasts of society. He felt that he was one of those, and these people are the real people. These people bear their souls. And he felt just as Ernest felt more comfortable with these ladies than he did with his social circle. This was his life, and this is where he felt comfortable living. And so he got involved with these ladies, probably first, on a professional basis. He paid them for sex, and then later got to know them. It would be great to be a fly on the... Oh, my cat's going again. Hopefully I can get this out before she starts. She's starting to scream now. She's getting a bit... she has a bit of dementia. She starts to scream and strange vocalizations. She's quiet again. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to be a fly on the wall, to follow Ernest round back then, to see what he was saying to these ladies, and the fact that a lot of them feel very comfortable in his presence. I think others just feel uncomfortable being photographed, not necessarily because he was around. Yeah, I wonder what they'll think about my belongings after I die. And I've got some interesting stuff, I can assure you. A lot of the stuff I haven't actually shown. Yeah, I hope it sort of stays together. I've decided to give you a peek at a few things I have here, which may be of interest, it may not. This is inside my little sound studio, which is not soundproof because you've often heard the cat screaming at me. When I lock her out, it's pretty good. And sometimes I have to. So in the foreground there, you can see an old 19th century mirror frame with a little... I might have a video of that separate, which I can show at the end. It has a little receptacle at the bottom, which holds a poem and a dried rose. That is my ex-girlfriend. This was a tribute to the German artist Franz Stuck. I did that in the early 90s. I'm not even sure if she's still alive, my ex. Otta doesn't mind that. It's art. That was just a period where I was doing a lot of art. Now I don't have the time, unfortunately. So that was what I created out of charcoal. It's a representation of Eve with the serpent wrapped around her. And I saw Franz Stuck's work in a book, and I was very much inspired to create my own. By the way, the wording carved into the bottom of the frame there, Die Sünde, means the sin. Obviously Adam and Eve's, the first sin committed by Adam and Eve, being tempted by the serpent in the Garden of Eden. I've just realized from there it looks like the hands are suspended in mid-air. But if we look a bit closer, we can see that she is holding a rose, which is pointing towards the human skull, the memento mori, a reminder of just how fleeting life is, just like the bloom of a rose. And as we go upwards here, we can see a mirror on the wall with a depiction of me. And I got inspired by the Van Eyck painting of the Arnolfina couple. I think it's a marriage portrait, or it's been called a marriage portrait. It might just show this rich merchant and his wife, but I was inspired by that. And of course the background is nothing like the Garden of Eden. It's a dungeon wall, because of course it is my goth symbolism coming out here. So it's like a goth Garden of Eden in a dungeon. So if you ever see these items in a junk store in years to come, or an online auction, grab them, because you will know that they once belonged and or were created by yours truly, Audibert. Yes, so there we have a red pencil drawing done by Althea Proctor, a well-known Australian artist. That's Art Deco. There's a beautiful old watercolour of Venice. And here we have a very unusual old Medusa frame. Can you see the snakes wrapped around the head ornaments there, and the snakes coming in from the corners? And to the left there we have all these old original labels from an old chemist in Interlaken, all from the same chemist, all these quaint old formulas that they would make up. Yeah, I spotted that in a junk store many years ago. I thought I'm going to grab that. How unusual. We have an old painting there. Oil painting on panel. Quite nice. Very nice. I like it. There's my old, I call it my Titanic light fitting. Exactly the same era as the Titanic. And there in the background is a pastel that I did of Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet as astral energy. It's an original Audibon. An original Audibon, my dear friends. And that's about it. So at least you got to see a few more things. So if you ever spot them, my dears, in the future, grab them if you want them. Maybe I'll be famous enough you'll make some money out of them. Maybe not. But please care for them. Be the caretaker. I guess they will, if they have a good look, they will associate my other life with my YouTube life, because there are also artifacts, inverted commas, of my YouTube existence around me as well. One of those being an old photograph that I included in a YouTube video really quite some years ago now. I still have that. There's a couple of them knocking around. I have my beautiful embroidery done by Jen. I have that hanging above my computer. I have my wonderful Hollywood star. What do they call it? The one they put on the pavement? I'm not exactly sure of the term. My Hollywood Star of Fame, but Ruth Shelton sent me that. That's a treasure. I have that also above my computer. I have my lovely watercolor and pastel done by Amy Keaton. Very lovely. There's probably a few other things around as well, which will... Yeah, and I've got all the USB chips. All of my YouTube videos are in a drawer, so that is what will be left of my YouTube. Oh, and my YouTube award for 100,000 subscribers. I got that a couple of years back. The cat is screaming outside the door there now. I've shut the door. I don't know if the microphone is picking that up. Can you hear that? Yeah, she's got a bit mad. Poor thing. And if I tend to her, it's 5 minutes later she's the same. I make a fuss of her, I'll brush her, and yeah. I think she's missing the dog as well. But she was already sliding into dementia before that. Yeah, my YouTube 100,000 subscriber award. Will I get the $1 million gold award? I think it's gold. Not real gold, of course. They're too stingy. But I don't blame them either. Probably not. I have my doubts because my content is no longer the content that they wish to promote. And of course, the type of content on YouTube has changed as well. They're trying to copy TikTok now. And so YouTube is now sort of, get into that corner of the market where, just these rapid scrolling videos, shorts. And so anything, documentary makers like myself, they're just being, pushed aside. They're trying to tell me all the time, YouTube, make shorts, make short. I don't want to make fucking shorts, yeah? So I'm just sticking with it as long as I can. My patrons here on Patreon are the ones who are keeping me going, basically. Without that, I would have stopped, and that's the truth of it. But there we go. Yeah, so let us now have a look at some of these portraits, the ones that I particularly liked. They tell a story. We just don't know exactly what it is. This one is interesting, quite sublime with all its decay, but she's sort of lying down a bit like Cleopatra, or how I would imagine Cleopatra lying down, regal and majestic, but she somehow doesn't pull it off. It looks a bit stiff. It doesn't look comfortable, does it? This one here, I wonder, is this Ernest Belloc's room? The photos or the images on the wall there sort of give it away. Don't know. I'm wondering whether that is actually his quarters. She looks very relaxed, doesn't she? Cigarette in hand, observing him, observing her. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And this lady, she's enjoying life, isn't she? Yeah, she's drinking to life, saluting it. I like that one, with the natural light coming through the French doors. I think this is one of my favourites. This young lady here with her crinkled dress on. This obviously has some emotional connection for her, this dress, which she no doubt keeps stored in a trunk or a suitcase, and she's brought it out for this special occasion. I wonder where she got it from. What is the story there? I like this one too. Playing with a little doggy. They've got the sawhorse with a carpet over it. I don't know what Ernest Belloc had in mind for a background for it. Oh, cat, please. After it was developed. And this young lady too, with her Sunday best on, visiting her friend in the hospital. Also a very interesting image. And this lady here, she's trying to look very regal, isn't she? She's putting on airs and graces, as my mum would say. And she's got the fur coat. And in the next photo, you can see where she really lives. He has a sort of screen behind. So she wants to present herself as a lady. And why not? Yeah, I don't know what the story here. This is the one with the carnival mask. She's obviously hiding her identity. I really apologize for the cat. I have to do this every day now. She's walking away. Every day she's just sort of screaming. She's not in pain. She's just calling out for attention. Yeah, I'm going to have to shut the door. Excuse me. Sorry about that. It's my chair squeaking. Yeah, with the carnival mask, she's trying to hide her identity. But she's looking very relaxed, isn't it? There's a sort of very relaxed smile there. And this poor lady with the black eye. What has happened there? One of her customers has given her a belting. Terrible. And by the way, these are photographs that Ernest Belloc took of Mahogany Hall, which was in the Lulu White story, The Queen of Storyville. He actually documented Mahogany Hall, which was the very famous brothel back then. You see, these are actually his images. Very interesting. Well, my dear friends, look, that one's actually broken, and the glass plate has broken. That's about it. Can't think of anything else to add. I would love to know your thoughts on this video. Yeah, I thought about at the start when I was editing this video whether I should cover up the nudity, and I thought, to hell with it. We're all grown up here, for goodness sake. Once it gets to YouTube, they'll demonetize it anyway. I don't care. We're going back to the Puritan age. Crazy stuff. All right, my dears. Take care, and until next time, God bless. Bye-bye.